Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Naveen Kumar. I am Associate Professor of Psychology at Bhimrao Ambedkar College, University of Delhi. We are going to discuss three modules of criminal psychology, and this first module relates to mass media and mass media and crime. So, in the realm of mass media, you should try to understand this first module of mass media, how mass media is affecting and influencing the lives of the people, and it will also help to understand how mass media is governing the lives of our day-to-day life, and it is also resulting into different kinds of implications. Knowledge of mass media processes can help us understand the well-being and ill-being aspects of mass media and how it has evolved and created dominance across domains. So, discussing the realm of mass media, we must understand that increased accessibility to the technology means that communication, information, distractions in various forms are virtually unlimited to different sections of our population. The number of internet users in India is expected to reach 450 to 465 million by June 2017, which is up to 4.8% from 432 million in December 2016. According to a report from the Internet and Mobile Association of India, Market Research International. The report also points out that 77% of urban users and 92% of rural users consider mobile as the primary device for accessing the internet, largely driven by availability and affordability of smartphones. The pattern of usage, however, differs across rural and urban populations. Mobile services such as emails, social networkings and online shoppings are prevalent in urban India, and it is entertainment in the form of video, audio content driving internet consumption in the rural counterparts of the country. According to Industrial Journal Industrial Journal of Psychiatry, it has become an increasingly popular notion that similar to other subjective rewarding activities, that is drug use, shopping, gambling and using the computer, using the internet can also become the object of addiction. American Psychiatric Association recommended inclusion of topic on internet addiction in its forthcoming DSM-5, but only as an appendix in order to stimulate further research. It has not been considered as an addiction in the formal sense of the term in the DSM category, but still there are indications that it may find a place in the times to come. The positive consequences of internet use include enhanced self-confidence, increased frequency, communication with the family, friends, feelings, empowerment. Internet use to the point of addiction may lead to impaired functioning at work, poor academic performance in schools and colleges, sleep deprivation, poor functioning of the immune system, back strain, eye strain, lack of proper exercise and even cardiac arrest. That means it is a double-edged sword which has advantages at the one side and which has disadvantages at the others. According to Tapscott, Net Gen are the adolescents who were born into this world already connected to the internet and for whom line assembly and knowledge about computer is quite commonplace activity. According to Tapscott, behavior of Net Gen adolescents is typified in 8 forms. These are freedom, customization, security, integrity, collaboration, entertainment, speed and innovation. So, it is different from previous generation, and net generation have grown up in a digital environment where they share, collaborate, create, connect together in virtual and real spaces. The evolving digital space is having a tremendous impact upon the upon the modern classroom, influencing both the student sensibility and the teacher's pedagogy. It is a real world learning experience that echoes Dewey's philosophy of education, who believed active learning for the real world encounters in the community was paramount. What garners oftentimes what is brightest and sensory content. Prensky claims that while digital immersion has given the internet generation superior scanning skills, this does not necessarily mean that they mastered reading and comprehension. For Prensky, reading online is a complicated task and should not be underestimated, but warns that this is not the same as critical reading. He calls the prolecterm based learning. According to Prensky, net generation students have certain characteristics, like they do not want to be lectured to, want to make decisions and share control, want to an education that is not just relevant but also relevant for their day-to-day lives. Common forms of digital communication include email, messaging, blogs, WhatsApp and social networking sites, which consume majority of the time of net generers and youth these days. Wilson and others contend that users create virtual representations of themselves, including pictures, textual descriptions and lists of internets, in order to gain social and benefits and feel perceived needs of self-esteem. Social acceptance and self-worth are important to individuals across the lifespan, but certainly during formative and middle school years, these concepts are particularly salient. This has been highlighted by some researchers. Mass media has been observed to be an important influence in precipitating and perpetuating mental illness and other emotional disturbances in the viewers and users. For instance, Rogen found that for people who with high levels of narcissism, high levels of Facebook activity were associated with depression. A new ecology called media ecology has emerged, establishing its own sets of rules through the process of communication. Huge efforts are made to impose a degree of homogenization, categorization, clustering, stereotyping and even indoctrination to enhance stability, sellability of products and ideas. Dominance of quantification and calculability is on the rise. We are moving towards a new social reality where boundaries between public space and private space is getting blurred and mirrored through digital media. Our worldview, diet patterns, political opinions, beauty tips, self-esteem is strongly being mediated through the norms set by media giants and propagandists having control over media. Meaning is not arising out of actual interaction. Instead, it is arising due to mechanisms separated from time and space. The above mentioned highlights the ever-increasing and far-reaching consequences of mass media. It is also important to understand that the role mass media plays have an influence not on our opinions, perceptions, attitudes and behavior at individual but also at societal level. Our next aspect that we will be discussing is emergence of mass media. In order to understand the complexity and impact that mass media is capable of creating, it is essential to know about the conceptual framework and theories of mass media. We as individuals, with the help of language and body language, join social cultural processes and diverse modalities of expression. In a primary oral culture, expression is totally untouched by any knowledge of writing, whereas secondary orality is considered with spoken and word of broadcasting, and tertiary orality is associated with digital media. The philosopher Walter Benjamin famously defined mass media in terms of their technical reproduction and discrimination, especially of artworks, but with the implication for other communicative practices as well. Digital media, in particular computers, has been described as metamedia, as means of expression and mode of interaction. One-to-one, one-to-many and many-to-many forms of communication have come up. Ubiquitous computing is a part of desktop model of human-computer interaction in which information processing has been integrated into everyday activities. Virtual media world allowed its users to enter a separate virtual reality, whereas ubiquity computing embeds multiple media inferences in diverse natural objects, artifacts and making of the world as a medium instead of world in a medium. James distinguished between a transmission model and a ritual model of communication. That means, it is not only communication of ideas, it is also the rituals that is being transmitted in this medium. Newcomb suggested a cultural forum model of communication. The most popular and accessible media is a culture represented in a television which articulates and negotiates common concerns. So, TV and other modes of media is not simply a normal mode of communication, it also concerns and communicates and transacts certain kinds of rituals and certain kinds of cultural practices. Giddens' concept of agency and structure are integral to concept social integration as well as to technologically mediated communication. All media requires agency for interactivity, deals with relationship of media with other institutions and social structure. Third level of interactivity describes the relationship of media to various levels of actors, interest, distance, communication, attaching meaning and orientation. Levi-Strauss, the famous anthropologist, referred to object to think with, especially animals that are part of the culture. Diet can become means of classifying and thus coming to terms with reality. It is not so much that they are good to eat to, but they are good to think, the Levi-Strauss. Contemporary media constituents institutions to think, highly differentiates and widely distributed material, models infrastructure that enable reflections and interaction across space and time. Culture and societies program their media in which in turn program them. So, it is not media is just circulating idea, it is also programming your mind. Habermas' public sphere model suggests that private sphere contains intimate spheres of religion, sexuality, emotions, friendship, for which institutions are family, and public sphere comprises of cultures including art, music, literature, political public sphere, and that includes mass media, economic and social issues and parliamentary organs. Gramsci talked about the theory of hegemony, which talks about the man is not ruled by force alone, but also by idea. So, manufacturing consent depends upon the manufacturing of ideas. An independent class of intellectuals does not exist, but rather every special group has its own intellectuals. Mass media theories and research needs to be highlighted to understand this, the growing aspect of mass media in our day-to-day life. Medium theory was propagated by Marshall McLuhan. In order to understand this perspective, we must try to understand the components of the history of idea. Hermeneutics, the meaning of one part of text cannot be understood only in relation to the whole of the text. So, referring to the works of Marx, Nietzsche, Freud, require identified and redeveloped a hermeneutics of suspicion. Its fundamental premise is to highlight and discover hidden principle of what people and institutions say, and thus differentiating between surface and the reality. It can well be computed with the help of phenomenology. Semiotics, out of the four humanistic traditions, semiotics had overwhelming presence to most of media and communicative practices. Defined most famously as a science that studies the life of science within the SIGNS, science within the society, Saussure, semiotics became influences method for communicative study. In its most ambitious formulations, semiotics proposes to examine language cosmology as sign processes. Ronald Barthes' widely influential model of two levels of signification suggested a common agenda of semiotic tradition, the analysis of concrete sign vehicles, texts and images as carriers of culture, ideology or myth. The two levels of meaning are normally referred to as denotation and connotation. Linguistic and communicative twin. All approaches recognize language as a precondition of human knowledge and social interaction. Wittgenstein defined language as a complex set of discursive activities, language games that are inseparable from the life, forms and practices that which they serve to constitute. His dictum that meaning is in use described that meaning infers neither in form of language nor in its correspondence to the reality, but in the ordinary or extraordinary uses to which language are put by people in communication. What we know is what we communicate about. 4 disciplines in humanistic research. Modern media created a new form of cultural infrastructure consisting of fine arts, visual arts, music and literature. Literature played its role with the advent of modernity as a special keeper of cultural heritage. As a special social institutions, modern literature was called upon to make it now by presenting reality to the reading public in new formats. The most famous account of modular structure of narratives was the analysis by Vladimir Prop of the constituent of the Russian folk tales, the recombination in any given tale. Relationship between text and content in digital mediated communication has required more attention. Linguistics. For long, language researchers gave importance to 3 main dimensions of language: grammar, semantics and phonetics. However, after 1970s, a clear shift in this approach started towards a critical interest in language as a constituent of interaction and conflict. Discourse analysis became an important feature of this approach. Language is also integral to qualitative research process, from interaction with informants to theory development. Now, important area of film studies emerged as the first non-alphabetic form of communication with a mass audience around 1900 till 1960. Film theory was divided into 2 traditions of realism and formalism. The selections and combination of elements, first within the single shot and next through the montage, juxtaposing these elements amount to much humanistic as well as social scientific theory has referred to as the social construction of reality. The constructivist approach suggests that activity of construction involve the spectator who are involved to rediscover not only the world, but themselves in the process of watching a film. Christian Metz set out to dismantle the loose metaphor about the language of the film and concluded that through film, like television and other visual communication, shares and certain categories with the other science systems, film is not language system in Saussure's sense. An early text by Laura Mulvey elaborated on the gendered nature of the spectator's gaze, particularly the male scopophilia, pleasure of looking, which seemed to be inherent in the narrative structure mode of address of the classical Hollywood film. A related challenge raised by feminism has to do with the very definition of human as one species but 2 genders. Interdisciplinary challenges. Postmodernist theory is referred as anti-modernist style in various arts, particularly in architecture. Postmodernists claim that modernity, especially the Enlightenment and the special progress achieved through rational science and representative democracy has ended, and grand narratives needs to be replaced with little narratives. That was claimed by Lyotard. One of the most extreme views of the postmodernist was advanced by Jean Baudrillard, who suggested that the distinction between science and reality has broken down and the calls for celebration of a resulting culture of hyperreality. Post-structuralism is a theoretical articulation of postmodernism. Another term for post-constructionism. Post-structuralism aims to highlight the uncertainty of knowledge, and any fixation of meaning or knowledge can be seen as a way of exercising definitional power, even committing violence against the worldview of others. However, critic of postmodernist theory David Harvey argued postmodern culture typify a period of stage of modernity. Feminism, anthropology and other social sciences recognize biological sex has variables, contestable meanings, explores genders as a culture's social category as ethnicity and class. The earlier studies focused on images of women, stereotypical representations and their effect on socializing. So, mass media also presents different images of women. Later studies of difference feminism focused on gender as a pervasive condition of all individual and social being, affecting the thinking and actions of both women and men. Certain conception of gender rights, contestables are likely to exercise hegemony because they are ingrained in predominant media representation and communicative practices. Some studies of gender gauge in empirical studies of the secret ambivalent pleasures of women enjoying popular culture. Cognitivism draws its theoretical inspiration from hard science, namely neurophysiology, cognitive psychology, medicine and computer science. During the 1980s and 1990s, film scholars introduced cognitive theory to the study of visual media, complementing early cognitive approaches to feature film viewing as a form of puzzle solving. Later studies have examine other genres such as documents and to develop typologies of the basic human existence emotions associated with visual communication. The concept of information processing approach, artificial intelligence and computer mediated communication are important areas in the field of cognitive media studies. Then we see a pragmatic turn. Speech art act theory describes that by speaking we act, and by extension we act through each new medium that we invent. Hall's model of cultural study highlighted the need to do away with simplistic two-step flows of media messages and reception as fixed, and advocated a circuit model in which information is encoded by the audience, which can be pro, in between or in opposition with the intended messages. Effects of mass media. So, there was a theory that described that it is only mass media production and its effect. It is not a one-way process. It is a multi-modal process. Cards and Lazarus Felt two-step flow theory argued that media effects are indirect rather than direct and established through the personal influence of opinion leaders. Tichonor's knowledge gap theory discusses how mass media can increase the gap in knowledge between those of higher and lower socioeconomic status. McCombs-Shaw's agenda setting theory describes how new media can influence the salience of topics on the public agenda. Cards et al. And Rosengren's users gratification theory attempts to understand why and how people actively seek out specific media to satisfy specific needs. Grebner et al. Cultivation theory argues that the more people spend living in the television world, the more likely they are to believe the social reality portrayed on the television. There is a vast range of reality that does not get the attention of the lens of mass media. Another theorist and his priming theory argue that media effects depend on the preconceptions that are already stored in human memory. Petty and Kakiopo and his elaboration likelihood model explains how mediated stimuli are processed via either the central or peripheral route, and how this processing influence attitude formation or change. Entman and and other theories proposed framing as a theory of media effects, which discusses how the media draws attention to certain topics and place them within a field of meaning, which in turn influences audience perceptions. Lang provided limited capacity model which analyzes how information processing affects their memory and engagement with mediated messages. Bandura's social cognition theory of mass communication analysis, the psychological mechanism through which symbolic communication through mass media influences human thought, affect and behavior. Slater's reinforcing spiral theory argues that factors close to one's identity act as both predictor and an outcome of media use. Media and non-media factors. It is not only the media that affects our behavior, it is also the non-media factors. There are roughly 5 features that describe the relationship between media and non-media factors and resulting media effects. Selectivity of first is selectivity of media use. Propositions of this paradigm are that people only attend to a limited number of messages out of the constellation of messages that can potentially attract their attention. Only those messages that they select have the potential to influence them. User and gratification theory of media suggested media users as rational and aware of their selection motives. Selective exposure theory argues that media users are often not aware of, or at least fully aware of, their selection motives. It is not only the media, but more important is the media user that they may bring about a change in the media effect. According to some theories, 3 factors influence selection of media use. First is dispositional factors like your personality, stable factors, temperament, personality and gender. Proximal beliefs, motivation, moods. Distal factors such as sensation seeking and trait aggression are linked to watching violent sexual media. Psychoticism, impulsiveness and non-conformist linked to watching horror films. So, different types of dispositions may lead to different types of usage of media material. Then the next is developmental factors. Developmental factors talks has and research has shown that individuals typically prefer media content that is not only moderately discrepant from their age related comprehension, schemata and experiences. Toddlers to slow pace, simple characters. Adolescents, social media, risky behavior, humor. So, the different age groups prefer different kind of media. Adults meaningful, younger adults violent and frightening, and older persons they will prefer certain spiritual kind of media. Social context factors also play an important role. Most mass media effects theories recognized that the importance of social context at the micro, meso and macro level in encouragement or discouragement of media use. Social influences can occur deliberately and overtly when institutions, schools or parents restrict or regulate media use. On the macro level, structural aspects of the media system can affect media choices, whereas on the meso level, adults can forbid children to watch violent content and encourage them to use educational media. Selective media use also operates on the level of social identity, the part of own self concept, and we derive from our membership in a social group or groups, Tajfel. Media properties as predictors. 3 types of media properties may influence media effects: modality, text, audio, visual, context properties, violence, fearfulness, type of character, argument, structural properties, specific effects, pace. Media effects are conditional and transactional. Theories propose the notion that media effects can be enhanced or reduced by individual differences and social context variables. Some theories have proposed that the same factors can predispose media selection, can also modify the direction or the strength of the effects of media usage. The effect of how media content is processed are contingent upon a specific disposition, developmental level and social context factors of media user. The disposition content congruency hypothesis argues that dispositional congruence media content may be processed faster and more efficiently than incongruent content, because it can be assimilated more readily to the media user's existing cognitive schemata. Transactional theory assume reciprocal causal relationships between characteristics of the media users and their selective media use factors in the environment and the outcomes of media. Media users are influenced only by media content that they selectively use and selectively interpret. Both producers and receivers of media content messages influence each other, and hence both can change as a result of media content messages they produce or receive. Transactions can be distinguished as interpersonal, that is a transaction between producers and receivers, and interpersonal, that is the transaction within the cognitive and affective systems of the producers and receivers themselves. New media environment and media effects. Computer mediated communication theories include email, online, face-to-face communication, which is less socio-economical. Social information processing theory explains new CMC partners gradually overcome the absence of non-verbal cues online by creatively employing verbal cues and interaction strategies to encode and decode social messages. In CMC takes the form of verbal communication with the level of interpersonal development among patterns of communication. Thank you.